Welcome back to Financial Clarity for Doctors. I'm Corey Janoff, joined as always by Rachelle Vanderzanden.
Hello.
And recently, I think probably just due to the demographics of my clients, more and more of my clients are kind of in that mid-career stage. It seems I'm more frequently getting that question, am I on track? The, in some cases, multi-million dollar question. Um, and this doesn't necessarily apply only to retirement. That's probably the big one that people ask about, but it could apply to any other objective, like paying down debts in a certain time frame, saving for college, saving for second home purchase, or whatever. Um, I think with any objective or goal that we have, first, I think we need to have a good sense of what that goal or objective is. And then we can work backwards to decide how we are, how to measure our progress. Are we on track towards that goal? If we don't really have a defined goal, it makes it a little more challenging to know if we're on a good track or not. Um, and then some goals can be more arbitrary than others, but when we're trying to put numbers to it, us little finance nerds over here helps if we have some numbers to work with, and then we can, the more precise the inputs are, the more precise the outputs can be. But where should we
hmm
start, Rochelle?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you were saying that that's whole part of the planning process where you like decide the goal, then you decide how you're doing in response to that goal, and then also that you assign your resources. Like this is what we have available to put towards these goals. So I know, Corey, you were mentioning that you're getting this a lot with people who are maybe getting closer to retirement, not there yet, but they're really like thinking about it more. They're not just starting as an attending. But I do have a lot of like new attendings also who also want to talk a lot about debt repayment and college savings, especially as they start to have babies and families. With debt repayment, I feel like that's one of the easier ones to just figure out if you're on track. Because with a lot of these goals, there are so many inputs that are unknown. So with retirement savings, like we don't know exactly how your investments are going to perform. We don't know exactly when you're going to decide to retire. We don't know exactly how much money you're going to need when you are retired because we don't know how bad inflation is going to be between now and then. So we can do our best to measure our progress towards those goals. But debt is actually a very simple one to kind of figure out. So that's one that like I like it because we have some concrete answers like are we on track? So when we're thinking about that, like it can be really uncomplicated. With a mortgage, for example, it may be like that your interest rate is really low. You're not terribly concerned with your mortgage payment and you just want to make your minimum payments. You know, if you're doing that, that you're on track to pay it off over 30 years. Done, easy, simple. For some people, it might be we want to target this repayment by the year 2050 because we want to make sure that when we retire in about that year that we just no longer have to worry about a mortgage payment. Even that is math. Like it's so simple just to like do a little math, figure out if you're on track. Like if your mortgage isn't doesn't come to term by then, like you can figure out how much extra you need to put towards your mortgage each month or each year to make that happen. Like there's lots of loan amortization calculators online that you can use, but you can also just email your banker. Like, "Hello, this is my mortgage. If I want it to be paid off in this time frame, how much extra do I need to put towards my mortgage?" And then you can make those extra payments. So it's very, very, very simple because it is just basic math. With student loans, I think the big and hard, like kind of challenging question right now is probably public service loan forgiveness, just because it's harder to assess if we're on track when like what we're supposed to be doing is changing all the time. So that's one that's a little bit challenging right now. And I think it's just a matter of like staying the course, doing what you're supposed to do when you're told to do it, and like trying not to worry about it and knowing that there will always be a plan B if you need a plan B. Like we can figure it out. But I think it's really just doing what you're told with public service loan forgiveness at this point in time, because there's so many big question marks about what may happen in the future. Those are things we can't control, unfortunately. But if you're looking at student loans and you're taking a more traditional repayment strategy, like you're not working for a nonprofit, you're just paying them off the old fashioned way, this is again basic math. Maybe you're deciding like your goal is a time frame. I would like my loans to be completely paid off in 5 years, or I would like my loans to be completely paid off in 10 years. You can use those loan amortization calculators. You can come up with a number. This is how much I need to put towards them every month in order for them to be gone in that time frame. And then sometimes it's like, oh, that's really not very doable. And then you have to adjust your goals and you have to make it different. So, for example, if you have $250,000 of student loans, and let's say the average interest rate is like 6.5%, and you want them to be gone in 5 years, you'd need to pay almost $5,000 a month towards those loans, which is very doable for some people, depending on like your specialty and your family situation and all of that kind of stuff, and may not be very doable for other people. So if $5,000 a month is just not something that you're able to work into your budget unless you're completely ignoring everything else that you need to do in your life, maybe we need to moderate our goal a little bit. So a 10-year repayment with that same loan package would be about $2,800 a month. Is that more attainable? Is that more doable? So make sure that when you're looking at your goals, you're not looking at them in isolation. You're looking at them with your other goals. Like, okay, like sure, I want my student loans to be gone. I also want to retire at some point. Like that could be important too. So just make sure that you're looking at all of those things together and doing some basic math on the debt repayment side of things.
Yeah, I think that's where financial planning gets fun is, if your only goal was pay off your student loans, then sure, maybe the 5,000 a month payment is manageable and we could have them done in 5 years or, 3 years, whatever the time frame is that we can swing it. But when we start throwing in the retirement, the college savings, especially goals that have a timeline attached to them. Like retirement can be a somewhat arbitrary timeline. College savings, though, is a pretty defined timeline. Once your kid is 18, 19, assuming they go to college, that's when you need to start paying for it. You can't say, hey, I'll pay for your college. You just have to go to college at age 30. Some people do. Like I had some classmates that were 30 years old. So there was one lady that was like 55 in one of my classes. But for the most part, it's you go to high school, finish high school, go to college. That's the normal progression. So if we're eager to pay off those student loans in 5 or 10 years, but it means we can't save anything for college until 10 years from now, and our kid's going to be in high school at that point, well, we might not have enough time to really save up enough to cover college then. So we have to maybe amend that debt repayment goal to accommodate the more time sensitive one if paying for college is even a goal of yours, which is another
Mm-hmm.
question. Everyone's
Absolutely.
different. Um, with the college, same thing. I think defining that goal. Do we want to pay for college at all? If the answer is no, then all right, we can just move along to the next objective. We don't have to worry about it. We're not paying for it. That's on our kid to figure out. If we do want to help in some way, shape, or form, defining what that way, shape, or form is will be helpful. Are we paying for 100% of college? 100% of any college? Just in state public school? Like if they get into Harvard, are we paying for it? There's a drastic difference, and you might be able to send your kid to the state public school for 30 grand a year or less in some cases, depending on the school. But some of those elite private schools are tipping over 100,000 a year nowadays, and this is today dollars. It's going to be more expensive 10, 15 years from now. Um, that's a significant difference in the amount you need to save and the out-of-pocket outlay. And then in addition to that, are we talking paying for grad school? Like, do we want to pay for med school if they get in, law school, some other form of education? Um, Again, no right or wrong answer, but defining what you're comfortable paying for uh, will then help us work backwards to figure out how much we need to start contributing now to get there. And it might be a staggered savings plan. Like we might have this, hey, our student loans, we're going to have those done in 5 years. At that point, we can contribute an extra 5,000 a month to the college savings. So, all right, we save a lower amount for the first 5 years and then a larger amount after that. Are we going to be on track? That can work too. So it doesn't have to be just one straight line for the next ever. We can factor in changes to circumstances. But anytime we're trying to predict the future, and this isn't really a predicting the future, it's just trying to plan ahead based on the information we have today. We know that plan and projection is going to be inaccurate and wrong because as much as we can guess what that future will look like, we don't know for sure. We don't know what our income is going to be. We don't know what our expenses are going to be. We might have another kid that we didn't plan for at that point that we got to feed and save for. Um, so things can change. That's why it's important with financial planning, continue to review regularly and adjust as needed. You got to bob and weave sometimes and make adjustments as time goes on. It's not a one and done activity. So with any of these projections and plans, just know they're wrong. And the goal is to gradually make them less wrong over time.
Yep. There are like college savings calculators and things like that online, especially if you have a 529 account. A lot of those accounts will actually have tools where you can put in your goals and kind of assess your progress towards those goals. I feel like a lot of times when I do these projections with clients, if they're targeting like 4 years of public in-state and they're starting when their little one is really, really young, $500 or $600 a month seems like a good dollar amount to be putting into these accounts to kind of target saving enough by the time they start that 4 year education. But again, it's based on a lot of assumptions like how much is college tuition going to go up by? Like, what are your investment returns going to be that we don't know? So that's where we go back to what Corey was saying about constantly kind of reassessing and making sure we're adjusting as necessary.
Assuming your kid graduates in 4 years.
And also, like, that they want to even go to college. Good grief. I mean, it could happen. It could happen. I know we're all educated people here, but
Sometimes I look at what some of these trade professionals make and I'm like, man,
mhm,
you might be better off going to be an electrician or a plumber or a
mhm.
welder or like a crane operator. I was talking to my neighbor. He was in the military. He was saying, yeah, we would have these specialized crane operators that, lift heavy ammunition onto the Navy boats and stuff. And like they would make hundreds of dollars an hour. And this was 20 years ago. So
That
depending
sounds like a
on
horrible job.
yeah, but someone might want to do it.
Mhm.
And, um, and then if you make good money and skip out on 4 years of college, just go to a 9 month apprenticeship program. Everyone's different.
Everyone is different. Very true. Yeah. I think the biggest question and definitely the reason we made this podcast episode is usually about retirement. Am I on track for retirement? And you can Google that. That's like the big multi-million dollar question. And Google will tell you all sorts of things, but Google doesn't know anything about you other than all the information that they've saved about all your shopping habits, basically.
And the blogs out there don't know you.
Yeah.
Like there's plenty
Yeah.
of blogs that'll tell you all different strategies and ways and projections. But again, it is really
Yeah.
case by case.
Yep. Especially when people start to get to the point where, they've got a plan for the student loans or they're gone already. They have a plan for their house, for their mortgage. They have the house. They've got a plan for college savings. Retirement is really like the longest term goal that most of us have. Like it's a little farther out. It's a little more like, I don't know, challenging to predict. Like, what does this even look like? Especially when you're early in your career. You're like, I can't imagine retiring. What is that going to be like? But, it's really important to kind of think about what your goals are again. Like, when do you want to retire? When were you able to start saving? What do you want retirement to look like? Are you a pretty simple person? Do you just like a simple lifestyle? Do you want to travel every month to a different country? Are you going to ease into retirement and still earn a little bit of income at the beginning because you want to like just kind of, you know, taper down, like work part time for a little bit and then eventually retire completely. There are so many different kinds of ways that you can approach this that it really, really is something that has to be customized to the person that has the goals, that wants to do the thing. Um, so there's lots of different things that we got to consider there. Corey, talk some
Yeah.
more.
The numbers part, at least for Rochelle and I, is
Mm-hmm.
the easy part. I think for a lot of people, the mental, emotional, physical, social aspects of being retired is the more challenging component. Like you've been in your routine for the last 40 years of, go work or, school, residency, job, work, kids, family, and then poof, all of that's gone. And you have ample free time and you lose a lot of the social aspects of your job. You now have to like engage in hobbies that you may not have had the time to do when you were working. You don't have structure in your day or year anymore. You've got to create that for yourself. You've got to like force yourself to go out and maintain social relationships with people. You're not just planning to talk to the same doctors and nurses and administrators every day on the job, and that's where you get your social outlets. So I think that can be a more daunting and more challenging component for people. And now is the time, or sooner rather than later is the time to start planning out that lifestyle and actually engaging in that lifestyle. I mean, we all read articles and stories about people that pick up a hobby when they're older, like, some lady decides to start playing the piano in her 60s and by her 80s can play all the masterpieces because she just plays piano every day. But most people don't start playing piano in their 60s. They start as a child or when they're younger. If your plan is to pick up golf or pickleball in retirement, I would say start doing it now, because odds of deciding to just randomly pick up a new sport or hobby or activity in your 60s is unlikely. It very well can happen. But I
Yeah.
think the more you do it now, you start developing
Ease that transition.
that skill set, you develop the camaraderie, the social people to do it with, makes it a little bit easier. So start thinking about that aspect of retirement now. Rochelle and I can handle the money part for you.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, what is that lifestyle going to look like? How much are we spending? Are we just hanging out gardening, or are we traveling? Are we, going on expensive fly fishing trips all over the world? Um, are we doing a lot of charitable work and giving? Are we supporting adult children maybe still? Varies from person to person. And there's everyone's circumstances obviously are different. How much we need to save, we can work backwards based on how much we think we'll need in retirement, and then what other income producing assets do we have, like Social Security? What's that going to potentially look like for us? Are we going to have any earnings? Like, are you still working part time? It might not be a ton of money, but if you're doing consulting or still working 1 day a week, or whatever, you have some income. Maybe you still enjoy medicine and you do locums 1 week a month. You're making some, okay income from doing that. Maybe it's not a forever thing, but for the first decade of retirement, that can definitely change the outlook and projections if there is income coming in. Do we have any pension income from our employer or the military? If we were in the military, do we have any real estate assets or plan to have real estate assets that are income producing properties like rental properties, et cetera? Any income that is in the picture will reduce the need for other assets like your regular investment accounts. But just looking at some rough numbers, we threw out some numbers on the college savings side. And the debt side, here's a random retirement one. Again, this doesn't apply to everyone, but assuming you have no income producing assets, no Social Security, we're just saving up and covering our own living expenses in retirement. And say you're 40 years old, hoping to retire with $10 million by your mid 60s, call it 25 years from now. You probably want to have about 1 to 1.5 million saved up at this point. Now, it seems like a far cry from 10 million. All right, if I only have 1 million now, I'm going to get to 10 in just 20, 25 years. Um, assuming you keep saving and adding to it and the investments grow over time, yeah, compound interest. It's what did Einstein said it was the eighth wonder of the world. It works magic. Um, by the time you're 50, probably want to have about 3 to 4 million accumulated. By the time you're 60, 7 to 8 million. And then, if we're kind of following that rough trend line, we should have around 10 million by our mid 60s. If we want to get to that target sooner, just have more sooner. And these numbers, don't get too discouraged if you're behind schedule a little bit, especially for medical professionals. If you're not really starting to save until your early to mid 30s, yeah, we're going to be a little behind schedule compared to what like the normal retirement targets look like. If you just Google, how much should I have saved by the time I'm 35, 40, 45, etc. But we can definitely play some catch up to make up for lost time. Also, stock market fluctuates. Those are just rough targets, but some years you're going to be ahead of those targets. Some years are going to be below those targets. If we've coming off a rough year in the stock market, if you had $4 million to start the year in your accounts, you might only have 3 million at the end of the year after a big down year. If we have a 25% drop, that's $1 million swing in your portfolio. Good problem to have. If you're at the point where you're having 7-figure swings, it means you've saved up a good amount. But it can also work the other way. If we have a good positive year, that 4 million is turning into 5 million. Um, so, a big down year might set you back from your target, but we don't want to fret and panic too much because usually after a big down year, the market has a good run for the ensuing handful of years. So, next handful of years, if it's strong, you might have 5, 6, 7 million after that point, especially if you're adding to it over time. So, really, we want to focus on what we can control, which is how much we save, how much we spend, both now and in the future.
Mm-hmm. I know it's so unpredictable that it just doesn't make sense to stress about it too much. But obviously, like you want to be doing all the right things. And that's why we ask the questions. Am I on track is really like, hey, am I doing everything I need to be doing? Like that's maybe the real question. So your objective is just to kind of like look at things and reassess as we're going along. And we know we're going to be at least a little bit off because our predictions and our estimations of inflation and investment returns and all those things are not precise. But if we keep assessing that, like the closer you get to retirement, you should be kind of narrowing in on that goal. You should be getting more and more correct as you get closer, as we have more like history behind us and less like uncertainty in front of us just because of time. So if we can try to save, 20 to 25% for those long-term savings goals like retirement, that's a really good number to have in mind as well. That's one number that we use for a lot of our clients because it's helpful to be catching up for all of that time you spent in training, not making a lot of money, not able to save as much as more of your peers that maybe went into other professions that didn't require quite as much training. And then ideally you can do that for, 25 years or more, and you should be on a pretty good track. But again, we're going to focus on the things we can control, like how much we're spending, how much we're saving, and try to ride the rest of it, like how the stock market is going and what inflation is and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're still in training or at the beginning of your career, really try and prioritize getting in those healthy savings habits early on. Like if you can, right from day one, it's easy to go from residency to an attending level income and carve out 20% of that new income to save for retirement. You're still getting a bump up in lifestyle and you're already setting yourselves up for retirement success. But if we've only been saving 10% of our income and we wake up in our mid 40s and we've got 3 kids, a mortgage, student loan payments, all the things, and where are we carving out the extra money to save? Rather than trying to cut things, your better bet is try and find ways to boost your income at that point and then just save 100% of that extra income to hit those targets. There's a finite amount you can cut, but there's an unlimited amount you can earn in theory. I don't know any doctors that are, making billions of dollars per year from their hospital, but there are ways to grow that income, which in many cases is going to be more practical and feasible than trying to reduce expenses considerably. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
try to get to that point. If you're starting in your early to mid 30s, saving 20 to 25% of your income will put you on a very healthy trajectory to retire by your early to mid 60s, maybe sooner if things go well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the later you're starting or the sooner you want to quit, the more you need to save. It's just simple math. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, the big objective, be less wrong tomorrow with our projections. It's we can't just take one look at age 37 and say, "Yep, you're good to go. Talk to you in 30 years when you retire." It's doesn't quite
Nope.
work like that. Things change over
Awesome.
time.
Well, thanks for listening, everyone.
We'll see you next time.